Joining me now to talk about the juvenile justice system is attorney Jeremy Eldridge. Jeremy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with SideStep. It's a diversion program. Do you believe that that is, first, a good idea in theory, the way that it was piloted?
Of course, having diversion programs that engage youthful offenders or even adult offenders, for instance, law enforcement assisted diversion or LEAD, has existed in the United States in places like Baltimore for over a decade. But they have to be utilized in a way that they're capturing the right audience, meaning low-level offenders that are not charged with victim-related crimes.
We heard from the state's attorney that, first of all, his office, he says he didn't know about this until earlier this year, even though it was launched in 2022. And he was concerned that it was being used for cases involving auto theft. The city says that's no longer the case, but there is still some concerns about victims and victims' rights in here. Can you explain why that is a concern for everyone involved in this program?
Of course, when we're talking about a criminal trial for either an adult or juvenile, of course, what's paramount is their right to a free trial or a fair trial. That's part of your constitutional rights, right? But the real issue here is that in these cases, victims and youthful offenders like juveniles should be on equal footing, meaning both of their interests should be taken into play to fashion the right outcome for the youthful offender and to make sure that the victim is taken care of. But if these cases are never prosecuted, if they're never brought to court, if the victim isn't included in the process, then you've cleaved off one of the most important parties. You have people that their cars are stolen, they're losing their jobs, they're not able to get to work, they're out of pocket, not able to have a car after that. And so you're really affecting these people's lives. They should be part of that process, and the mayor's office cut them out of this process.
Now, if the victim is part of that process, whether it's with one of the other charges that is a qualifying charge for SideStep moving forward, if the victim is okay with it, would that be an appropriate use of SideStep?
100%. In fact, the Department of Juvenile Services already has what's called an intake procedure. And at intake, which is before the charging decision is made, that DJS employee can reach out to a victim and can say, for instance, the old knocking down the mailbox with a baseball bat, hey, this kid's parents and the kid want to pay it back, they'll do some community service, do you mind? It's not when this interaction occurs, it's whether this interaction occurs. And you have to include the victim in the process, or we're leaving the most important party out of it.
Taking a step out, zooming out here, talking about juvenile crime overall, the concerns that we're still hearing from people, listening to people at the town hall. I mean, what's missing here? We're listening to lawmakers make adjustments last year during the legislative session. We're still seeing some concerns from people about juvenile crime. Why are we still having these problems?
Look, as a former prosecutor and current defense attorney, I shouldn't be the one that has to say we're not paying enough attention to victims, but that is exactly what's happening in the juvenile justice system. And the fact that we're not still able to aptly and promptly report youthful offenders who violate being on CDM or community detention electronic monitoring, which is like home detention with the box on their ankle. The fact that we're still having issues with that, we're not including victims in the process. It's difficult to build faith in the community within the criminal justice system, and for them to believe that if they come forward and report a crime that they're going to be taken seriously when they're immediately cut out of the process and the offender's back on the street is why we're still experiencing these issues today. Something has to change, and it has to change now.
The state's attorney wants to have lawmakers change when the decision for detention is made and wants to remove the Department of Juvenile Services from the process and have that decision be made by a judge for detention. Do you believe that is an appropriate plan moving forward?
Either a judge or a juvenile magistrate, which is like a judge in juvenile court. But there's no reason why DJS should be continuing to make these decisions. Frankly, they've shown that they're not worthy of that responsibility. And when we have this pattern of irresponsibility, then the community needs to step forward. They need to talk to their legislators. Their legislators can go into Annapolis and they can change that law and change that policy. But until the public shows that they don't trust this system anymore and people like Ivan Bates speak up about it, we're not going to see any change.
All right, Jeremy Eldridge, thank you for your time and your insight, as always.
Thank you.